Level 1. The Blind Eye. This is not about goals. This is about the players who have already decided what happens next before the ball arrives. The ones who dictate the game and make others shine. And it starts with two players who, for completely different reasons, never quite did that. Cristiano Ronaldo is the greatest goalscorer who ever lived. He is also one of the least natural playmakers on this list. Not because he lacks intelligence, because his intelligence was never pointed in that direction. Ronaldo's reading of the game was elite. He processed space, movement, and defensive shape faster than almost any player who has ever lived. But he read it for one purpose: to score goals. The scans, the runs, the positioning, every cognitive resource pointed at one outcome: his own threat, his own goal. And here is where it gets interesting. Ronaldo holds the all-time Champions League assists record with 42. For a player at level 1 of a Playmaker list, that might seem contradictory. It's not. It tells you how complete he was as a footballer. And it tells you exactly how high this list goes. The Champions League had a habit of bringing out an elevated version of an already extraordinary player. And even then, the playmaking was never the point. The goals always were. Fred played 230 times for Manchester United. He ran, he pressed, he chased, he gave everything he had every single time he crossed the white line. The discipline and work rate were never once in question. Manchester United signed him for £52 million, believing they were investing in a player who could contribute in multiple phases. What they got was a destroyer who won the ball and immediately handed responsibility to someone else. In certain systems, that is a legitimate and valuable function. As a return on a Playmaker-level investment, it was not what the business case promised. Level 2. High highs, low lows. James Maddison at Leicester City was one of the most creative midfielders in the Premier League. In his best season there, he scored 18 goals and registered 12 assists. Leicester's Player of the Year by some distance. The reason certain Champions League clubs were genuinely interested. He moved to Tottenham in 2023, and his first 2 months were extraordinary. Both assists in the North London derby at Arsenal. Premier League Player of the Month in August. Spurs top of the table. Then an ankle injury in November ended his season. What followed was a stop-start sequence of knee problems, calf strains, and a ruptured ACL in pre-season 2025-26 that has meant he has barely played consecutive games for 2 years. Maddison did not stop delivering. His body stopped letting him. Martin Odegaard. When he is in form, Arsenal play a different kind of football. He controls tempo, finds the pass before defenders have processed it, and makes the team look like they could beat anyone. When he is not in form, which happens more than Arsenal fans would like to admit, the passes go sideways, the ambition disappears, and he can drift through games without leaving a fingerprint. In form, he belongs several levels higher on this list. Out of form, he belongs here. Both versions are real. Neither has silenced the other. This level is not about bad players. It is about players with genuine playmaking quality, whose consistency means you never quite know which version is turning up. Both unlucky with injuries, which might explain parts of it. Level 3. The final third. Creative quality is real here. The vision exists, but it has a ceiling. It works inside a specific zone, in specific moments, and outside of that zone, these players become ordinary. The playmaking is genuine. The range is not. Phil Foden is the clearest example of this level's central problem. In 2023-24, he was voted the best player in England by his own peers. PFA Player of the Year, FWA Footballer of the Year, 19 Premier League goals and 8 assists, hat-tricks against Brentford and Aston Villa. At his best, he finds teammates in spaces that do not appear to exist, operates between the lines with a fluidity that most players cannot replicate. Then 2024-25 arrived. Illness disrupted his start. The rhythm never came. And a player who had looked like the best in the country was having quiet months for a struggling City side. The ceiling when he's on and connected is genuinely level 6. Several inconsistent seasons keeps him here. The question his career is still answering is which version is permanent. Ángel Di Maria is one of the most decorated players of his generation. Champions League winner, World Cup winner, Copa America winner. A man who scored or assisted in almost every final Argentina played for a decade. In the 2014 Champions League final, he was man of the match. In the 2021 Copa America final against Brazil, he scored the only goal. In the 2022 World Cup final, he scored Argentina's second. He holds the record for most assists in a single Champions League season, with 17 in 2013-14, and is all-time second in Champions League assists with 41. There is a Rabona assist in the Champions League that UEFA's official account still posts as a throwback because nobody has worked out how he hit it that well. The big game record is extraordinary. What keeps him at level 3 is the space between those peaks, the weeks where the playmaking retreated to the wing and the vision narrowed to a single direction. Level 4. The Reliables. Mesut Özil from 2013 to 2017, including his first seasons at Arsenal, was among the most reliably productive creators in European football. At Real Madrid, he led La Liga in assists for 3 consecutive seasons, 47 assists in 3 years in Spain. At Arsenal, he immediately led the club in key passes every single season he was fit. His first season at the club, he registered 76 key passes, the most at Arsenal that year. His second, 69. Then, 2015-16, 146 chances created, still the Premier League record, and 19 assists. The next closest player that season had 119 chances. He was operating in a different atmosphere. The fade that came afterward does not erase what those first Arsenal years were. When the application matched the ability, level 4 was the floor. Dani Olmo is the cleanest current example of this level. At RB Leipzig, he won 2 DFB Pokals and developed into one of the Bundesliga's most creative attacking midfielders. The player who scored a hat-trick against Bayern Munich in the Super Cup and spent 4 seasons making a Leipzig side without elite forwards look dangerous. At Barcelona, he contributed to a domestic treble in his debut season, despite persistent injury problems. For Spain at Euro 2024, he scored the semi-final winner against France, assisted the decisive goal against Germany in the quarter-final, and played the full 90 minutes of the final. In the current La Liga season, he sits in the top 4% of the entire division for expected assists, better than 96% of his peers. The record is not flashy, it is consistent. That is exactly the point. Juan Mata arrived at Chelsea having finished second only to Xavi for assists in La Liga in 2009-10. Nobody noticed particularly because Xavi was winning everything and Mata was at Valencia. He won 2 consecutive Chelsea Player of the Year awards, the only Chelsea player to do so since Frank Lampard, while helping them win the Champions League and Europa League in successive seasons. His corner found Drogba's head in the 88th minute of the 2012 Champions League final against Bayern Munich. Mata's playmaking was never loud. It was never meant to be. Level 5. The Orchestrator. This level is where the playmaker stops creating moments and starts controlling games. The pass that does not just find a teammate, it decides what happens for the next 3 moves. The players here do not react to the game, they set its terms. David Silva at Manchester City for a decade was the least celebrated elite playmaker of the Premier League era. He did not produce Özil's single-season highlights. He did not have De Bruyne's explosive passing range. He had something harder to measure and more valuable to have: the ability to make the team's system function at full capacity for 10 consecutive years. Guardiola, who has worked with more elite midfielders than perhaps any coach in history, called him one of the best he had ever trained. 4 Premier League titles, a World Cup, 2 European Championships. No player at City created more assists across his decade at the club, a career that ended on his own terms. When Silva received the ball under pressure in a tight central area, the entire defensive block had to reorganize. That's game management. Vitinha failed at Wolves. He made 5 Premier League starts, scored 1 goal against 6th-tier Chorley in the FA Cup, and was sent back to Porto having convinced nobody. His one Wolves goal was struck from 30 yards and swerved so violently that his own captain said afterwards, "It was one where you're thinking, don't shoot." 4 years later, he had completed more passes in the Champions League than any other player across 2 seasons. 1,965 of them at a 93.71% accuracy rate, while creating as many chances as Vinicius Jr. during the same period. Luis Enrique called him the perfect midfielder. Guardiola, after PSG beat City in the Champions League, admitted they had been out-controlled specifically in the middle of the park. The talent was always there. It just needed someone to build a system around it rather than asking it to fit somebody else's. Paul Pogba. At Juventus between 2012 and 2016, with Pirlo providing the structure behind him and the system built to give him freedom, Pogba produced passes and carries from central midfield that no other player in world football was attempting from that position. The diagonal from inside his own half onto a forwards run. The first-time ball in tight spaces with 3 players already committed to closing him down. France at the 2018 World Cup. Kanté absorbing every defensive responsibility, and Pogba operated as the most complete box-to-box playmaker on the planet for a month. When the structure fitted, the version of Pogba that existed inside it raised questions that his career outside it never quite answered. The comment section has views on where he belongs. That is exactly what it is there for. İlkay Gundogan is the most underrated orchestrator of his generation. At City under Guardiola, he was the player the system demanded when it needed to slow down, speed up, or transition between the two. The right pass to the right person at the right moment across 8 seasons. At Barcelona in 2023-24, he was their best player. 16 goals and 7 assists as captain, their most reliable creative force in a season where everyone else was inconsistent. And somehow still the player everyone forgets when listing the great midfielders of his era. That kind of invisibility is almost an achievement in itself. Level 6. The Game Deciders. Everything up to this level has been about creating opportunities. The players here go further. Their playmaking does not just unlock chances, it decides results. The pass that cannot be prepared for. Andrea Pirlo. AC Milan decided he was finished in 2011. He was 32, his legs were going, and the club let him leave on a free transfer. Juventus took him. What followed was 4 consecutive Serie A titles, a Champions League final, and a World Cup already behind him. 3 Man of the Match awards at the 2006 tournament, the Bronze Ball as one of its outstanding performers. Italy won it. Milan made the mistake every club makes when they confuse the importance of what a player can no longer do with what he actually can. Pirlo was never about speed or frequency. He did not need to cover ground quickly or receive the ball constantly. He needed to receive it once, in the right moment, and the game went where he pointed it. The brain processed the situation before the situation had fully developed. The pass arrived before the defender had decided where to stand. Juventus understood that a 32-year-old Pirlo with slowing legs was still more dangerous than any midfielder in Europe, because what was slowing was never the weapon. The weapon was the mind. 4 titles. Across those seasons, the players around him were the privileged ones, given the conditions to express themselves because one man had already decided what was going to happen. That is a playmaker at the highest level. Kevin De Bruyne. The 2019-20 Premier League season, 20 assists, 136 chances created. a single-season record that only Özil's 146 from 2015 to 16 stands above. Across a decade at City, he created 827 chances, at least 294 more than any other player in the Premier League during that period. And by the time he left in 2025, he had equaled the all-time Premier League chances created record, matching Fabregas on 846. The partnership with Haaland was the most destructive creative pairing in modern football. De Bruyne knew where Haaland was going before Haaland had started the run. One pass, timed to a fraction of a second, that turned the best striker on the planet into a certainty. That is what level 6 playmaking does. It does not find a teammate, it makes them unstoppable. Harry Kane. One of Jose Mourinho's first acts as Tottenham manager was to call Kane into his office. In that meeting, as captured in the TV series All or Nothing, Mourinho told him he could build his status into one of the world's best. Kane said he wanted to be like Ronaldo and Messi. Most people assumed that meant goals. It did not. Under Mourinho, Kane began dropping into the number 10 position vacated by Eriksen's departure, finding Son in behind with passes Gary Neville described as containing a little bit of the Zidane in him. In 2020-21, he led the Premier League in assists with 14 and won both the Golden Boot and the Premier League Playmaker of the Season award, the first player ever to win both in the same season. Then Bayern called. Then Musiala got injured. Kane filled the role as if it had been waiting for him, dropping between the lines, finding runners, controlling Bayern's tempo from a position that had nothing to do with finishing. The Bundesliga described him as a 6, an 8, a 9 and a 10 simultaneously. Mourinho saw it first. It just took the rest of football a few years to catch up. Level 7. The Visionaries. Zinedine Zidane. In a Champions League quarter-final in 1998, he received a long ball in midfield and, without looking, hooked it into Alessandro Del Piero's path with such perfect weight that Del Piero barely had to adjust his stride. No glance, no hesitation. The decision was already made before the ball arrived. That was Zidane at 25. By 2002, the Bayer Leverkusen manager said after the Champions League final, "We could spend forever planning on the training ground, but then something special happens that you cannot mitigate for." He was describing Zidane. By 2006, he was 34, and in his final tournament, he dismantled Brazil in the quarterfinals so thoroughly that one journalist wrote he was Bruce Lee in slow motion while Kung Fu chaos reigned around. He threaded passes through a defensive block that was physically between him and his target. He stood over a free kick and curled it to the exact yard where Thierry Henry needed it. 3 tournaments, 3 different decades. Every time the stage got bigger, Zidane got better. For him, the game never moved fast enough to cause him problems. Lionel Messi. His manager Guardiola described it precisely. After 5 or 10 minutes, he has the map in his eyes and in his brain to know exactly where the space is. The map, a complete spatial model of the game, updated in real time, telling him where everyone was and where they were going before they knew themselves. He holds the record for most assists in La Liga history, 192. The most assists in international football, 61. The most career assists of any player ever recorded, over 400. For 5 consecutive seasons, he topped La Liga's through ball charts, and in 2 of those seasons, he made more through balls than anyone else managed in 4. In 2019-20, he registered 21 La Liga assists, a single-season record for the competition. What makes those numbers more remarkable is where they came from. A right winger, a false 9, a number 10, a free attacking midfielder, a deeper creator in his later years. Different managers, different systems, different positions, same output. Speed, dribbling, and playmaking normally trade off against each other. In Messi, across 15 years at the highest level, they never did. Bruno Fernandes. Here is the number. In the 2025-26 Premier League season, Fernandes has created 98 chances. The next closest player has created 56. The gap between first and second is larger than most players' entire season totals. Since joining United in 2020, he has created over 200 more chances than any other player in Europe's top 5 leagues, 636 in total. Kevin De Bruyne's numbers at City were extraordinary, but De Bruyne had Haaland, Silva, Aguero, and Bernardo Silva around him. Fernandes has produced this across 6 seasons at a club that has spent most of that time rebuilding, rotating managers, and finishing mid-table. That sustained output has come regardless of where United finished in the table, regardless of the manager, regardless of the quality of the striker playing ahead of him, and regardless of the positional role asked of him in any given week. Dropping deep, operating as a 10, pressing from the front. The system around him has changed repeatedly. The numbers have not. A player who has been the leading creator in the Premier League in 5 of the last 6 seasons at a club fighting for top-half finishes is not being carried by the system. He has been the system. That is what level 7 looks like when the team around it does not always deserve it. From the player who reads the game entirely for himself to the 3 who see things the rest of football has not caught up with yet. If you think someone is on the wrong level, and you probably do, let us know in the comments. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one.